I have your saying up for the day because I know that's how you all are feeling this last week of school. What ducks? Because hopefully it's the majority of people's last week. Yoo-hoo! Maybe 2 days next week, but it's all party week that week, maybe, hopefully. We still have a minute. And I got to share this next one too, and then I'll come back. I'm a person who wants to do a lot of things trapped in a body that doesn't. How many feel like that today? However, this is probably my favorite. My ducks are absolutely not in a row at this point. I have no idea where my ducks are even on. Still have people coming in. It's so great to see everybody. Glad that you're here. Glad that Christmas break is almost here. I'm hoping that you all have a relaxing, restful Christmas break. That means turn off the computers, leave things alone, hide, do whatever it takes. I know that's impossible, but try to take a break. Okay. I'll get rid of my ducks are absolutely in a row, and because it's 10 o'clock and we want to make sure that we are cognizant of your time. So let me stop sharing. And I want to introduce, Patty, I hope you get to feeling better. That COVID stuff's nasty. I know it's not, it's just a weird thing. So y'all take care. I want to introduce Sarah Kirk. And she's going to ask you a little question real quick before we get started. And before she gets going, she joined us back in November, and she did a first time recording, if you will, of the behavioral interventions, and we've recorded that. I will send that along with this recording to you this afternoon. So you will have both recordings. Then that way it'll be a little bit better. So anytime, if you have questions, please down at the chat, chime in, or you can come off mute and ask questions. And we will let Sarah Kirk, the school counselor specialist from SDE, begin. Thank you all for joining us. Take it away, Sarah.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you all for being here. I was telling Lisa and Annette before we got started that I know this is a wild week. From when I was in the school setting, it's full of parties, but also all sorts of other things that you all are responsible for. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I just wanted to check real quick. Like Lisa said, this is meant to be a bit of a continuation, but I know some of you are here for the first time and were not with us in the November meeting when we talked about social, emotional, and behavior interventions. So just to help me gauge our audience, if you see the little reactions button at the bottom of your screen, could you give me a thumbs up like this if you were at the session that I hosted in November? And if you don't know how to do that, you can write it in the chat too. Okay. All right. So we have some of you that were here, but it looks like most of you are first timers or weren't here with us last time. So that's great. All right. Thank you for, Dusty getting creative. Got the thumbs down in the chat. I like that. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then. Thank you for helping me figure out where we're at so that I don't repeat myself too much for those of you who were already with us, but I do want to give a little bit of context before we dive in so that we're all on the same page. And like Lisa said, we have the other one recorded. So please go back and watch that because I'm not going to go over everything that we went over last time. Otherwise, we'll run out of time again. So, like we said, we're here today to talk about social and emotional and behavior interventions. And I am Sarah Kirk, the school counselor specialist at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. I was a school counselor for 9 years before coming into this role. So everything that you'll hear about today are things that I used in my school counseling program with success. When we talk about putting supports and interventions in place, I think that this is one of the more popular topics. People always want to know, what can I actually do to serve my students? And I absolutely love that. I want you to have really good ideas of how to serve your students. However, if we don't lay a good foundation and understand how we define these interventions and how we most effectively use them, then they most likely won't work. So I want to quickly review what we talked about last time. And for those who are joining me for the first time, review just a little bit about how to use these types of interventions. If you're familiar with the tiered approach, I think that's the easiest way to understand this, because we don't want to be using the ideas that I'm talking about today. Most of them are meant to be like a tier 2 intervention. So it's for those groups of students that need a more targeted approach. So typically we like to say this is about 5 to 15% of our school population. So if you'll pause for a second and think in your head, whatever your school population is, and do the quick math of about 10%, you'll see it's a pretty small number. I usually had about 400 students on my caseload. So we're thinking about 40 students. So it's not a large number of students, all things considered. What I see happening a lot is these types of interventions we're talking about today are implemented more at like a tier 1 level, meaning really that says 80%, but I always say it's really 100% that get tier 1, because those are those school-wide supports. And we want a strong tier 1. And I'll talk about how some of these interventions could be used as tier 1. But if you're doing it like in a small group setting or individually with students, it shouldn't be a tier 1, because we can't do that with 100% of our students. We want good, strong, evidence-based curriculum and other supports for that tier 1. And then we have these more targeted interventions that are appropriate for those tier 2 and maybe a little bit at tier 3. So thinking that through, again, I won't go over all of this since I went through it last time. You'll get this slide deck with some ideas of more of these tier 1 type supports. And then, like I said, today we're going to be talking a little bit more about tier 2 and tier 3 that are those targeted interventions. I also want to mention that we want to decide who gets these supports based on data. We don't want to be just randomly assigning these interventions again, or it's unlikely to work. It's also likely to leave out populations of students because we don't have a organized approach to deciding who gets those different interventions. All right, so I'm going to quickly go through some of these because, again, we've already gone over this and you can check out the recording if you missed it. A couple of things to little disclaimers as we get started, making sure we avoid haphazardly assigning interventions to students. Again, that's why that data-driven approach is really important. Some of these things I talk about today, you might think in your head, I don't have time for that, which I totally get. That's actually why I started using these in my program, because I found ways that my program could become bigger than just me. And you'll hear me talk about that in several of these interventions, how I empowered or helped teachers implement these interventions, or I used different teaching assistants or our secretaries or librarians or different educators in the building to bring them in to be a part of these interventions and these supports. So it wasn't always me doing them, which again is a way to make your counseling program bigger than just you, which is the goal. But also making sure we're not thinking that these interventions are going to solve all of our problems. They certainly won't. And I don't want you to go back to your school, put some of these in place and think, voila, everything will be better again. That's often not how it works. Sometimes we have to try multiple interventions. Sometimes we have to go back to the drawing board. That's what we do as school counselors. And making sure that we're thinking through not only using data to determine who receives the intervention, but thinking through how we can collect data to show if the intervention is working. We won't get to talk too much about that today because that could take up all of our time. But if you have any questions about that, you can always reach out. And lastly, these are meant to be preventative. These ideas we're going to talk about today must be taught preventatively, meaning if a student is in the middle of a meltdown, then a breathing technique that they've never learned before will not work. I can promise you, if you start trying to tell them the steps of a breathing technique in that moment, it's not going to be possible, and their brain is not able to comprehend that. However, if we do teach some of these ideas, that then they're able to retrieve the skills when needed. Again, that's why that tier 1 level of support is so important, because we're teaching these skills preventatively to all students, and then they can retrieve them when needed. All right, I'm going to get through all of this. This slide right here tells you all of the tools and interventions that this presentation talks about. The list on the left-hand side, we already went over, so I'm not going to go over those. And then the list on the right-hand side are the ones we're going to try to get through today. I told Lisa I probably filled this so full that now we're going to not get through, even though this is a follow-up to get through the ones that we didn't get through last time. So I ended last time with these mindful moments, and I told you all I would link those ideas here. So I just wanted to mention that they are linked now. And for those of you who weren't with us, these were just card decks and books that include scripted mindful moments that can be used really easy without a lot of pre-preparation. These are some of those tools that could be used tier 1 school-wide, because you could do things like starting the day with a 5-minute mindful moment school-wide. Or I've heard of schools reading a mindful moment over the intercom during morning announcements. So that would be a tier 1 support because all students are getting it. But then if you have a student in need of more of a targeted support, like a tier 2, then you could use some of these tools they've already learned through their mindful moments in a more targeted approach if they're needing more additional support. So you can see there how it was used preventatively, taught school-wide, and then it can help those students who might need a little more support. Again, if the student is having a meltdown and I try to say, all right, we're going to do a mindful moment now, and they've never heard of that, it's not going to work. So keep that in mind as well. So this would be a great tier 1 that could be used school-wide. And I talked more about that in the previous presentation as well. Another idea that I really enjoy and I've used in a lot of different ways is mindful writing. So when we think about mindful writing, there's many ways we can do it. It can simply just be journaling, but there's also a lot of other unique ways to use mindful writing. So crush the can'ts is a mindful writing technique where you simply write down things you feel like you cannot do or you're not good at and crush them. It's just a really visual way for students to feel like they're gaining some power over things they feel that they can't do or that they're not good at yet. It's also a really good thing you can use that and process through some growth mindset ideas too. You may not be able to do it now, but that power of yet is a good one to combine with crush the can'ts. Brain dump is a really fun mindful writing technique. I like this one, especially with older students. Essentially, the rules of brain dump are just that you write without worrying about spelling, punctuation, handwriting, any of those things. You just write what's on your brain. I always like to do this with my students so they can see that it's helpful for me as well. There are no rules to it. You really just get to write what's on your mind. Positive self-talk writing. This one I usually use sentence starters. So those are a couple: I am, I can, I want, I dream, really whatever you want to do, but to kind of get them thinking positively and kind of in ways that they could remind themselves later on. So I often will say, when I'm doing a positive self-talk writing exercise, we'll do all of that. And then we'll talk about when we could use this positive self-talk to help us. So we process through when we're feeling down on ourselves, when we get a bad grade, when our parents are mad at us, those kind of situations, how positive self-talk can help. Oops. Worry journals. I often had anywhere from 1 to 10 worry journals on my shelves in my school counseling offices that were assigned to a specific student. So say Annette is having a lot of worries, then I might get her just a cheap spiral notebook and put Annette's worry journal on the front. And then Annette knew she could come to my office for short periods of time, maybe like 5 minutes once a week, or we'd work something out with her teacher where she could come and just write about her worries in her worry journal. So that's something that can be really powerful. You can also encourage people to have a worry journal at home. So you could give them a journal and they could take it home with them if that's helpful as well. Daily quotes are a fun way, again, probably for older students, but I love the power of quotes, especially if they're from people that the students can really connect with. There are all sorts of quotes from people that are really popular today, athletes, musicians, actors, all sorts of people that are positive messages. And so using those daily quotes and then having them reflect on what they feel about that quote. One of the schools that I worked at decided to have students just pick their favorite quotes, and then we would read one of their favorite quotes every morning during morning announcements, and the student got to say why it was their favorite. And it was really cool and a really good way to share inspiration. Circle of control is another mindful writing technique. I say one of my favorites a lot. I realize I have lots of favorites, but circle of control is really simple. You just draw a circle on a piece of paper and have the student write the things that they can control inside of the circle and the things they can't control outside of the circle. So this is really good for students with anxiety, or students who are experiencing a lot of things at home that they don't have control over and that are really hard. And it can really help students grasp that they don't have control over everything. So what can we do to make the things within that circle better, or make us feel better, and worrying less about the things outside of that circle? Again, I had circle of controls with students' names on them. They just kept in my office, and they'd come in and add a couple of things and then go on their way. So again, a really short intervention, but a good way to give students some power over their situations. So I love mindful writing. I think it's a powerful tool. This is another one that really most of these would be more tier 2 students who need more additional support, but you could also empower your teachers to use these in their classrooms so that it's more of a tier 1, like the positive self-talk could be one of the journal entries for a classroom where, again, you don't even have to be there. You could just encourage the teachers to use that or something. And it could just be their morning. A lot of classes have morning writing time. So it could be their morning writing time. So there are ways you could use this school-wide that you wouldn't even have to really be a part of. You could just give your teachers good ideas. So another way you could do this, I love it, a good alliteration. So often schools like to have things called Mindful Mondays. Today is Monday, so we're having ourselves a Mindful Monday here. But you could, again, each Monday give your teachers a topic of how to incorporate mindful writing into the day, or a mindful moment into the day once a week on Mondays would be a neat way to do it. Mindful movement, of course, we mostly think about yoga when we think about mindful movement, but there's other things we can do as well. I shared with you those card decks last time, and they're linked on this to make it really easy, even if you don't think of yourself as a big yoga person. There's a lot of research to support just adding a little bit of movement into our days. For our pre-K students all the way up to 12th grade, we really need that movement, and doing it in a mindful way is a great way to incorporate it into our school settings. But not just yoga. I also like what I call rainbow walk, where you go on a walk and you find things, the colors of the rainbow in order. So starting with red, find something that's red. orange, going on and on. I like using that one when I'm with students and I'm walking them back to class. It's a way to make our hallway walking time a little more effective, and it really helps them. It increases their mindfulness because they're paying attention to what they're seeing. It's lowering their heart rate if they were upset. It's just giving them a really good way to kind of regroup before going back into the classroom. Same with the five senses walk. That's just where we identify things with each of our five senses. So sometimes I would do this with a student who needed a break. We could go outside for a brief moment and see how many things we could see, hear, smell, touch, and so on. There are lots and lots of apps that can incorporate mindfulness as well. Here are some of them. I think that mindfulness is best done in real life, not on an app, but I do understand how powerful apps are. And so these are good ways to add tools to the tool belt as well. I also often shared these with my families and with my students because we know they have access to devices. So why not put some mindfulness apps on there as well. The Stop, Breathe, Think, the one on the bottom, is my favorite simply because they treat teachers really well and they give you a lifetime premium version of the app for free. And you can sign up at that site right there. At my school, we used that app and put it on all of our iPads for all of our students. So they had access to that while in the school setting, which was great too. Mind Yeti is a little different. It's more of a game. I mean, that's through Second Step. So if you use the Second Step social emotional learning curriculum, Mind Yeti is a little game and app and program that is tied to the Second Step curriculum, but also focuses on mindfulness. All right, so let's take a little bit of a different turn away from our mindfulness techniques into some other ways to support students social, emotional, and behaviorally. So this one is a daily check-in. You can see in this photo, this was a teacher that did this every day with her students. So this was a tier 1 classroom support where students would take a sticky note and put it on where they were feeling at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day. She had the students write their name on the back of the sticky note. So when they stuck it on, you couldn't see the names. And so it was anonymous. And then she was able to follow up with students who were feeling a way that she wanted to check in on them. And so there's some really neat ways to really cater to your classroom based on how everyone's feeling. If everybody's feeling joyful on that day, then you know that there's likely to be a good positive start to the day. But if everyone's feeling meh, then maybe that's when we need to add a mindful moment to the morning or something like that. So this teacher did a beautiful job really adapting based on this. And it was preventative because if she wouldn't have been asking them how they were feeling, she wouldn't have known and she would have started her day how she planned. And instead, she was able to see, oh man, I've got a lot of students that are feeling sad, angry, or stressed today. Maybe we need to spend a couple minutes practicing our breathing techniques this morning or something like that. So again, super powerful. Her and I also communicated really regularly about this. Sometimes if a student were put their sticky note down at the bottom, said I'm upset and need a check-in, she would text me and see if I was available. And if I was, I could check in right away. That helped her to, and since she wasn't always able to check in right away, and it allowed me to learn about some of the things happening with some of her students that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. So again, this is probably going to be implemented in the classroom by the teacher, but as a school counselor, you can really help empower and recommend these kind of things. These ideas don't have to be school-wide. You don't have to say everyone in our school needs to do this. But if you have a teacher who's really struggling with behavior in the classroom, then you might recommend something like this as an approach to address that. Delby, I do too. I thought it was funny. And if you knew this teacher, it's very her. So, and you could even, being creative about what feelings you put on there, you could have your students decide. I think that'd be a cool way to give them power over their check-in. What do you want this one to be? What do you like the word joyful? Do you like the word happy? What resonates most with you? So you could have your students decide the check-in words, feeling words as well. Speaking of, this is another really cool way to do a daily check-in with students. I always had a big copy of this mood meter in my office, so I wasn't using this school-wide. This was more of a tier 2 when students would come in. This is usually how I started my time with students because I loved not only getting a good idea of how they were feeling, but I also love how this mood meter works. So let's walk through it real quick. So you can see the different colors. And if you're familiar with Dr. Mark Brackett, this is his work. The Ruler SEL curriculum uses a mood meter, and that's where this comes from. And I just love this tool. But you can see here that the red is high energy, and so you're up here on the energy, but you're low on pleasantness for the red area. The blue area is low energy and low pleasantness. Green is lower energy, higher pleasantness, and yellow is high energy, high pleasantness. So if a student would identify that they were feeling, lonely in the blue area, then we would talk about how that felt both low energy and low pleasantness. And we would talk about how to get to where they wanted to feel, because then I'd have them identify another feeling on here that they were hoping to feel. This is also really powerful. This a little older, middle school, high school, but it's really good at seeing that. Like, for example, at ease, right here, the corner of green between the closest to the blue is a pleasant feeling, but it may be lower energy and lower pleasantness than fulfilled, and that's okay. So it really helps them process through their different feelings and really strengthens their feelings and emotions vocabulary. So I love this tool. Again, probably not appropriate for younger elementary and not as easy to do classroom wide, but a great thing to have in your counseling office to use as needed, and a really good way to help students learn these feeling words. I often had students who didn't know what one of the feeling words was, so I'd have them look it up and learn about the definition and kind of think about what that feeling felt like in them. So really cool way. I know there's some research, I can't remember. I want to say that there was research done, and most students can identify 4 feeling words. And don't quote me on that. I'll have to look up the exact research, but it was really astonishing how low the number was of how many feeling words they could identify. So something like this can really strengthen that vocabulary and a great tool to use. All right. Small groups, of course, are a great behavior and social emotional intervention for our students who need additional support. Typically, tier 2 students are who benefit the most from small groups. Small groups can be on a variety of topics. I listed some there that I've done before, but it can really be anything. We typically think of small groups as more of instruction based when they're those types of topics listed there. We can also do counseling small groups that are more therapeutic, like usually those topics are grief or managing divorced parents or some of those more therapeutic type approaches. Usually the small groups I did in my school setting were instructional small groups, meaning we were learning a skill. And so you can see there, most of those are skill-based, which made them instruction. Oops, I keep clicking too fast. If small groups are too much to think through right now, I know they can be really hard to get up and running. A lunch bunch is a great alternative. A lunch bunch is essentially an informal small group that happens at lunchtime. Typically, you don't get as much done because the students are also trying to eat. And so you can't put in as much instruction and as many activities and that sort of thing, but it can still be a really powerful way to bring small groups of students together and have meaningful conversations. So that is an idea as well. Typically, I like to have both lunch bunches going on at the same time as small groups so that my small groups could be a little more productive. But again, lunch bunch is a great place to start. Once again, I know I already mentioned this, but keeping in mind that when we implement small groups or any tier 2 intervention, we want to be intentional on who we put in those small groups. If we're only putting students in small groups because a teacher asks for it, or a parent asks for it, or we think they need it, we're missing students. It's not an equitable way to identify students. So we really want to use data. If our small group is friendship skills, that topic on the top, then maybe we could identify data that of students who have had conflicts, peer conflicts, or something like that. And some of those are harder, like emotion management. We may not have data that shows students that are struggling with that because it may not be, a student may not get a discipline referral because of difficulties with emotion management, but we still want to do a small group on that. So that data might be like a mini survey to students, asking them to self-report how well they feel they can manage their emotions. And you could identify students based on that. Of course, there are drawbacks to using, that's called perception data. And there are drawbacks to using that because students may not always be honest. So we may want to do like a little bit of a hybrid. We could use teacher reported referrals to small groups, caregiver reported referrals, and student perceptions. Maybe that's a good way to increase that equitable access to the small group. But just keeping in mind, we don't want to hand select students because likely we're going to miss out on some that need the support. All right, our next support, this is just a quick little intervention you can do really anywhere. I did this one all the time on recess when I would get called out to a conflict that was happening at recess, or if I was on recess duty and something was going on. This is called the 5 whys. And essentially all it is you ask why 5 times to get to the root of the problem. So I give a little example here. I understand this is a very basic example and it's not likely to play out exactly like this, but I wanted you to get the point. So I would say, why did you choose to hit the other student? And the student says, I was mad at him. Why were you mad at him? He took the ball I was playing with. Why did he take the ball you were playing with? Because he wanted the ball. Why did he want the ball? Because he wanted to play too. Why did he want to play too? Because the game is fun and he wanted to be included. And you can see there how by asking those why sentence starters, we got to more of the root of the problem. The student started out telling me that he was mad and that's all he could say. How many of you have been with students before and it's really hard to get much information out of what happened? And it's hard to get to the root of what's going on because they're kind of in that one track mind of I'm mad at him. That's why I hit him. And so these why sentence starters can help you get to the root of the problem. And then you can process through that. So in this scenario, I might process through the importance of including others in our activities and games and that sort of thing. Of course, I always say when I introduce this intervention, make sure you're really empathetic and genuine when you use it. If you use it exactly how my example is here, it probably will come off as not very genuine and then it won't work. So obviously you would talk a little bit more with the student, allow the student to talk, but keeping in mind that those why sentence starters can really help us get to the root of a problem. Proactive circles is our next intervention I wanted to talk about. And some of you may be familiar with this, or you might be familiar with restorative circles or restorative practices. I am a very big fan of restorative practices. And I wanted to mention that today, but really that could be an entire presentation. So instead of diving too deep into restorative practices, I wanted to introduce the idea of proactive circles, which is one part of restorative practices. So proactive circles, the key elements, they are proactive. That's a very important part. So again, they're not meant to be implemented reactively. It is important that students are sitting in a round shape. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect circle, but you want to be in a circle so that everybody can see everybody. That's the point of that roundish shape. You do want there to be a facilitator in proactive circles. So usually it's the teacher, you as the school counselor could be the facilitator. But because these are proactive circles, we want them to happen pretty regularly. And so usually empowering teachers to use these in the classroom is ideal. But it can be anyone and it can be any adult really. Usually we want to have some sort of talking piece. So I always had all sorts of talking pieces that I would use that were obvious, but not too distracting. So that can be, it can be a fun pencil, it can be a wand, it can be really anything that they can hold. Some of the younger grades, I did like a small beanie baby, sometimes something fidgety, like, these things are so popular. Could be something like that because they can fidget with it as they're talking, which is helpful sometimes. And really just introducing that the talking piece is shows who's allowed to talk. When you have the talking piece, it's your turn, and otherwise it is not. And then you have questions that you bring up in your proactive circle. And the experts on proactive circles talk about high quality questions. So we're not saying like, favorite ice cream, typically. Those are fun questions, but we really want high quality questions when we're having a proactive circle, because the point is to clear up any conflict or strengthen relationships of the people. And so the questions obviously guide that conversation and help form really strong relationships of the people within the circle. So I linked a couple of resources there of example questions. This would be a great resource you could provide teachers, so they would have to do very little prep work and they could start implementing these proactive circles. I also linked an article there where you can read more about these. I often, when I present about proactive circles, I often get asked if this is the same as like a morning meeting or something like that. A community circle, morning meeting, that sort of thing. It pretty much is. I think the only difference is that proactive circles are really meant to, the purpose is to be relationship building and to minimize conflict. And so we're really focusing on that. Again, we're not going to talk too deeply into restorative practices and restorative circles, but the restorative circle is really when there's a big issue and we need to fix it. Then we can start putting restorative circles in place. But it's great if we already have the proactive circle procedures down, then when we need to do a restorative circle, it's easier. So if that makes sense, it's a good way to, again, use a preventative approach so that then when a more targeted intervention like a tier 2 restorative circle is needed, the students already understand the procedures. Validating feelings. This is something I used all the time in my school counseling job. I would have this printed and put on my wall so that I would remember, or by my computer, because it is so normal to want to say the things on the left side. And I am guilty of it all the time. But when we think about validation, you can see here the importance of it. So validating feelings can be a really powerful way to help students feel seen and heard. And when we use responses like, that's not true, you're really smart, or that's not true, you're a great friend, or that's not true, you're beautiful, something like that, or don't say things like that, or maybe you should just try harder. Those kind of things, we think we're being helpful, but they're not validating how our students are feeling. So you can see there on the other side, responses like, wow, that can't feel good, or tell me more about why you're feeling this way. Wow, I didn't realize this was so big for you. I totally get it now. You can just see and feel the more empathetic and genuine responses in that way. Again, when you lay it out this way, it seems obvious, but we are probably all guilty of not being as validating as we can be or we should be, especially when students come to us with things that may feel minor or unimportant to us. I think about, like the girl drama that happens or some of that. And it's really easy to just want to kind of put a Band-Aid on it and send them on their way. But we're really not helping the situation in that way. So making sure we're effectively validating feelings is really powerful. Affirmations are another tool that we can use in a preventative way to really help our students. So you can see here, I won't read all of this, but these affirmations, there's some really cool research supporting the use of affirmations. Again, usually in the classroom setting. Typically, this needs to be teacher-led because affirmations really need to be used repetitively, and we don't usually see the students as frequently or as regularly to make these really effective. So thinking about how we could help our teachers implement these in the classroom are a great way to really use this intervention, again, preventatively. So an affirmation, you can see those examples down there. I refuse to believe I'm stupid any longer. I'm smart and I accept that now. Or I refuse to believe I am unlovable any longer. I am lovable. I am loved and I am lovable. I accept that now. So you can see here what an affirmation is. Typically, when I've had classroom teachers use this, they had affirmations that were the teacher and the student came up with one together and they repeated it to each other. So it wasn't a class-wide thing because you can see here they're a little bit specific. So that second one, I can picture the student so clearly that we used that one with, and it was a student who had some really difficult things happen to her. She had been in foster care and she'd lived in a lot of different homes. And so that feeling of being loved was really missing for her. And so her teacher and her wrote that little affirmation. And when the student needed to hear it, she could go ask the teacher and they would repeat it together. And she also had it written on a little note card that sat in her desk. So it was just a special little thing that the teacher and her had. I helped facilitate that idea, but I was not the one who did it with her. So again, you can see there how I didn't implement the intervention, but I helped the teacher and the student put it in place. So these can be really cool on those more individualized bases if one is needed. If the whole class wants to do something similar to an affirmation, I love the idea of mantras. So you can see here this example. We had a classroom that used this. I think this was their exact one. I can't remember for sure, but they had a little saying that they did back and forth, and the teacher would say a line and then the class would respond and they went back and forth. You can see this example. Who's loved? I am loved. All of the time or some of the time? All of the time. And you can imagine the students got so into this, they would scream it at the top of their lungs and get really excited when they did it. But just like with the affirmations, it really needs to be done repetitively. If you use it once, it's not going to have a whole lot of power. And it really is meant to be just like what we said with all of the others, preventatively instead of reactively. However, the classroom that implemented a mantra that I worked with, they had taught it preventatively, but it was a real game changer when the class started to have some difficulties because it would really help them regroup. It gave both the teacher and the students a chance to come back together, take a deep breath, do their mantra, and really feel that good energy and then continue on with the day. So again, something that would probably be led by teachers, but can be super powerful if you help teachers get this implemented. Like I said, the validations and affirmations and mantras, all of those really depend on repetition. One and done does not work with those interventions and those supports. So making sure that you keep that in mind. I love this. Muhammad Ali was really known for his affirmations. He used his affirmations all the time, but he was quoted saying, it's the repetition of the affirmation that leads to the belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. So I love that idea of that's why that repetition, we've got to change the actual wiring in our brain to make those validations and affirmations and mantras really work. I gathered these supports and interventions off of some training I do on trauma-informed practices, because these are such strong trauma-informed ideas as well, because those are students that come from trauma that have a high number of ACEs can really, really benefit from a repetitive practice like that. And again, that rewiring of the brain and of how we view ourselves and of how we view the classroom can really improve our sense of self and our belonging in the classroom. So these are really great ways to do that. And of course, when I think about all of these different ideas we've talked about, none of them matter if we don't have relationships with our students. And I think you all know that, but I always like to mention it when we're talking about supports and interventions, because interventions are great. And I love every single one I've talked about and have seen firsthand how powerful they can be. But when I really think about why they were powerful, it's because of the relationships I had with my students. And it's because I truly believe all of these quotes on the screen. I had these hung up in my office and posted everywhere at different times. And it's the truth. It's the relationships have to be at the heart of everything we do for these types of things to work. And I always reminded our teachers that as well. I often would present about many of the ideas that we've talked about today, trying to encourage teachers to use these. But again, if the teachers need to first form those strong relationships, create that community within the classroom, and then start using the other tools, that's when the true magic happens. It very rarely happens the other way. So keeping that in mind as well. I think about that 5 whys support that I told you all, asking all the why questions. If the student knows that you're mad at them, or the student doesn't feel that you have a strong relationship with them, that intervention is not going to work. Same with some of the check-in ones we talked about. If the student feels like you're checking in with them just to do an intervention, it won't work. We talked last time about mentor programs, and I introduced 2x10 intervention and check-in, check-out. Those are all rooted in relationship. That's all they are. They're just unique ways of creating the environment for a relationship to make a difference in the life of a student. So keeping that in mind, and like I said, I will share this slide deck with you all, and you can use this. I think that many of these are best shared with teachers, like I said, because we want to empower our teachers to use these supports and interventions, but just making sure you don't leave the importance of relationship out of it, because it is what matters most, I think. So I think that is it. I have a slide here with lots of resources links, so you can learn more about many of the things we talked about at those links. And of course, my contact information is there as well. And I wanted to leave some time. I know that we did not have enough time for questions last time, so I was hoping to have enough time for questions, which it looks like we have about 10 minutes, which is perfect. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions about any of the supports or interventions we talked about last time or this time. Yes, Michelle, I will get the slide deck to Lisa, and she will send it out with the recording of this presentation and the recording of last time's presentation, if you missed that, because we did go over several other interventions that I didn't mention today. Yes, yay. I never, ever believe in reinventing the wheel also. So if I share the slide deck, but you're, wondering about something that isn't included in there, isn't linked, send me an email, because if I have it created somewhere, I will always send it over to you all. I have a very big Google Drive of all the things I've ever used, and I want them to be used. So always ask. If I don't have it, I'll tell you I don't have it, but you can always ask. And if I have the resource, I will certainly send it over.
And that's what this is all about. Sharing resources. Don't invent the wheel, reinvent the wheel, just ask some others. So that's great. I can't wait to create some of these to use in our school, including teachers, staff, and students. Yeah, because there's a lot of great things to share with the teachers, and letting them feel like they're a part of this also is a very good thing. So great ideas. I agree. But we don't want
Delvia, I'm gonna, oh, sorry, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
If no one has any questions right now, I'm going to brag a little bit on Delvia and also tell a little bit about some conversation her and I just had. What was that last night? I emailed you back, I think. But Delvia had some great questions about what her schedule should look like and how you fit these kind of things and some of the other ideas of comprehensive school counseling into your schedule, which I know for those of you who might be new, or even if you're not, sometimes it's hard to figure all of that out. So we always ideally want to strive to be spending 80% of our time providing direct and indirect student services. Everything we talked about today would be a direct or indirect student service. So even if I'm working with a teacher to implement proactive circles, that's an indirect student service because I'm collaborating with that teacher. So keeping in mind 80% is the ideal. So now that's ideal. Keep that part in mind as well, because often we have to work towards that. But we really want the biggest chunk of our time to be doing that. And Delvia had asked me, how do we decide how much is small groups and how much is classroom lessons and how much is individual and how much is collaborating with those teachers? And that part's a little bit harder to determine. There's not a cookie cutter answer because it's really based on your school need. So I'll give a quick example I worked at two different schools. The school I worked at in Norman, I loved that school. It was fantastic. I stayed there 7 years and just adored it. But we did not have a lot of support. We didn't have an assistant principal. We didn't have a social worker. We didn't have really anyone but me and the principal. And so that's where I created a lot of these interventions, was because I didn't have enough of me to go around. So I needed the teachers doing some of this, and I needed my support staff helping with some of this. And it created a really strong culture and it really worked well. But then I moved to Tulsa and we had a social worker, I had a co-counselor, we had 3 assistant principals. I had a lot more support. So then I was providing more direct student services. So in my job in Norman, I was doing more indirect, helping teachers and other people get these things going. And then in Tulsa, I was providing more direct. So I wish I had a really good answer for you all, but if you think about your school setting and what works, but keeping in mind 80% is the ideal of those direct and indirect student services. And if you ever have any questions about how to calculate your time, I can give you resources on that. But everything we talked about today should be the bulk of what we're doing. We just know we have to advocate and work towards getting there, because it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes strong advocacy and leadership skills for sure. Definitely. Taylor said, not sure if anyone is familiar with the Usborne books, but they have several books on mindfulness and they're really good too. Thank you, Taylor. I'm not familiar with those, but I'll check those out. Yeah. And Mindfulness Coach is another free app. Awesome.
So yeah, that's great.
Oh, Mindfulness Coach. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that's an app that Jill shared. Yes. So I want to share it. Sarah, you're the best. I had to change it because, as you all saw, my little cat's ears here, Annette and Sarah are not cat people. So I changed it to a dog. I thought I'll be nice. And, because that's why I turned off my camera, because my cat was trying to stretch out and have a good time. But anyway, thank you so very much. Any other questions? I do not want to cut anybody off. So I thought, hey, I wanted to share that and have some fun. And I do want to, I'll tell you some things here in just a minute, but as I said, I don't want to cut anybody off. If somebody has other things to share, any other questions, Sarah has put her email address in the chat. So please, 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 and go on with that. And I want to share with you, and I'm going to cheat just a little bit. Let me see. First off, I got to share this one because I've got my order. Remember, the best times in our lives were not about what we had, but who we were with. And so kind of give a little forward, yay-hoo, Annette. Annette is the new director for student preparation. And you notice it's kind of changed the titles for college readiness. We have asked Sarah now to join us next summer at our Summer Institute in June the 13th, 14th, and 15th, to come and present over the ASCA model and some other things. We're working on the registration, and that's working on the registration to get it out. It is next, as I said, June 13th, 14th, and 15th. We start Monday afternoon and go till Wednesday after lunch. It is going to be at Shangri-La Resort. Beautiful place. If you've never gone to that website, please go there because it's a gorgeous place. And that will be in charge of it. Yoo-hoo! No, I'm just teasing. She'll do a great job. And she was acknowledged at Friday at our Regents meeting. She was approved, if you will, for the new director. And as I said, we've kind of changed the title. They've changed the title to put college readiness in there. So she will be looking for a coordinator. Hopefully that they will be sending that out. We'll send that out on the website on our job postings whenever that becomes available for a coordinator's position to take her place, because they will do that. So we're just thrilled that Annette has gotten the job, and we're thrilled. I'm thrilled, and I know you all are thrilled because she'll do a great job. The cost
I'm pretty thrilled myself, by the way.
The cost for Summer Institute, $350.
I think 360 because it's 2 nights.
Yeah, and that cost pays for your food and registration. The registration pays for your food and lodging. You can bring your families. Shangri-La does not charge extra for the rooms. There'll be 2 queen beds or a king bed. Your family will have to pay for their own food. I think, Annette, you want to look up the price for sure on what I cannot remember, to be quite honest, but we'll look that up and let you know on the cost on that one. But it's a great time. It's like this, but you're in person. It's sharing resources, having other people come, and and it's on a beautiful lake and with beautiful surroundings. And we'd love to have you join us. And yeah, I'm going to see if Teresa Shackley will let me shack up with her that night and come and
Shack up.
bug you. I know, Teresa Shackley, shack up. Teresa, hopefully that'll be okay.
Quit saying that.
I know it. I want to come and join in, but we'll see how that goes. But because this is my last retreat ever. So it's been fun. Annette will have desk retreats next semester. Everybody has said they enjoy these hour-long desk retreats, so we'll get those going. And
I'm going to jump in and also say, while we have a few minutes, I'm putting our website in the chat. If you want to go there, that is where the registration link will be. But also, I am 98% sure that Sherry Pankhurst is going to be joining me at Roman Nose in February. We do still have some spots available if you are interested in registering for that. She would be joining Teresa and myself at Roman Nose for our student prep conference, overnight conference. It's on a Sunday, Monday, the 20th and 21st of February. So Sherry Pankhurst, that was with us a couple of weeks ago with a desk retreat. She's from ACT. I just told her, present a little bit and get ready for a flood of questions. So if you feel like meeting with her in a small setting in person would be helpful, get your POs ready. And that is $165 for the early bird. So shameless plug. Just wanted to let you all know it's going to be a good resource.
And these are the other 3 retreats that we have left.
Tatanka Ranch is full.
Oh, sorry. Lake Murray. is still open. Let me blow those up so y'all can see them. And this will be, just like she said, this will be where we'll have the Summer Institute also. But for those of you big schools, large schools, I know you got to get your POs ready early. So just round it up for $400. How's that? And we'll find out for sure what it is.
Yes, 400 would more than cover it. I just can't remember if it's 350 or 360 this year, what we settled on. So
Yeah. So questions, comments, concerns? Oh, wow, we did well. Sarah, again, thank you so very much. Counselors, thank you very much. We hope you have a very Merry Christmas. I had to get all animals in on this picture. So you cat haters, you just deal with it. I got the dogs and I've got the rabbits on there. So
Lisa,
oh,
I'm
wait,
still
I know it
seeing
now.
your-
I see it's not even on there, but now it's on there, right? Now
yes.
you've got your picture. Sorry, got to get in the groove of things. Thank you all so very much. We appreciate your time. Thank you so very much for everything that you all have done. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, and I will definitely add you to the prayer list, continue to have you on the prayer list because I know you've got a lot on your plate. Sarah, thank you so very much for all those wonderful resources, and thank you for the Ask model that you have developed, and now I can go fight with legislation with my full exact name to say, hey, you take care of these counselors. They do a lot of work. So talk to your legislators, guys. Talk to the people that are in your areas and let them know that you are worthy, and we need to get you all some help bad. So thank you all so very much. I know we've got some things in the chat. I appreciate it. Thank you all for the kind words. I've enjoyed all my years with you, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime. So I'll try to get better on Facebook. If you have my numbers, you can still text me. I don't care, because I'll need somebody to talk to, because I'll be bored to tears, because, I'm used to talking. So thank you all so very much. We appreciate it. Have a great day, and have a Merry Christmas. Please get some rest. Please get away from work over Christmas. Give yourself a break. You need it. You deserve it. And hopefully 2022 will be great for everyone. So thank you all so very much. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.